Lesson 9, Part 3, Contract Verbs. Contract verbs are verbs whose stems end in alpha, epsilon, or omicron in the first stem. When these verbs get their theme vowels and endings, the vowel at the end of the stem and the theme vowel and endings contract. Technically, the theme vowel and the endings contract first, and then that combination of them contracts with the vowel at the end of the stem. So la le o becomes la lo because epsilon plus omicron equals o. La le ace equals la lace because epsilon with epsilon iota becomes epsilon iota. La le, same thing. La le amen, the epsilon and the omicron come together and form u, la lumen. La le ete, the epsilons join together and make a, so la late. La le usi, epsilon plus omicron upsilon equals omicron upsilon, so la Lucy. This happens in the first stem only, but it happens everywhere in the first stem. Present active indicative, present middle passive indicative, imperfect active indicative, imperfect middle passive indicative, present participles, present infinitives, and more that we haven't learned yet. So it's going to happen everywhere in the first stem. There's going to be contraction. Most of the verbs are fairly recognizable, but if you're unsure, identify the stem and remember what vowel should be at the end of it, and determine what possible combinations could have formed that ending. So for example, if you were trying to parse philumen, you can probably look at that and go, it's phileo and it's in the first person plural, present active indicative, not too tricky. But if you weren't sure, if you wanted to make sure, or if you had no earthly idea what was going on, well, identify first what the stem is or what the stem was, which would be filet. You should at least be able to identify that umen is the theme vowels and endings and etc., which would have left you with phil, and then you'd remember from your vocabulary phileo, so stem is filet. All right, where is the contraction? The contraction is u. Okay, what combination with the vowel at the end of the stem could have made that contraction? Epsilon plus what equals u? Well, either epsilon plus omicron equals u or epsilon plus u equals u. Figure out which one makes sense as part of an ending. What's an ending we know? Do we know an amen ending or do we know an umen ending? Oh, we know an amen ending. Of course we do. Now break the word and parse it. So we had filet and we had amen. Oh, present active indicative first person plural. We are loving. Not too hard. You just got to break down the pieces. Now, there are some exceptions to things with contract verbs. The present active infinitive of AO verbs, we would expect to be ein, but it's not. It's just an. And that's sort of short, so you'll want to make sure you know that. Present active infinitive of AO verbs with the omicron is un, not oin, like we would expect. So those iotas sort of drop out and some other things happen there. Now, in all the other stems besides the first stem, so this is second stem, third stem, and all the stems we haven't learned yet, the vowel in the stem lengthens. Alpha to eta, epsilon to eta, or omicron to omega before the sigma or the sa gets added. So for example, we've got agapao, which shows up as agapo in actual, written out form. This is the uncontracted form, which never actually shows up. This is the actual form of the future active indicative first person singular agapeso. So what happened is this alpha lengthened into an eta before we added the sigma for the future, and then that's an ending. In the third stem, this is actually the aorist active indicative first person singular, agapesa. Same thing happened, the alpha lengthened to an eta before we added the sa ending, and we've got the augment at the beginning. Here's present active indicative, future active indicative, and aorist active indicative first person singulars again. La leo, the epsilon lengthens to an eta in both of those places before the sigma or the sigma alpha gets added. Plerao, the omicron lengthens to an omega. Pleroso and plerosa. Oh, that should be eplerosa and elalesa. Missed the augments on those two. Now note, this is one exception. The epsilon in kaleo does not lengthen, so you would get kaleso and ekalesa. So here are the stems for the contract verbs. They are all almost completely regular. You'll notice there are a few exceptions. I'll point them out as I go. There's a key over here on the right to this numbering system, which I believe you've seen before. Anything with a 1 is regular. Anything with an 11 is contract. Those are going to be the two things we're going to see the most here. And I have labeled most of these as regular because they follow perfectly the contract rules for forming a second and a third stem. So as we said, agapao, we've got agapa, agapes, and agapesa, and everything happens normally there. Aiteo, in the first stem, when we add an augment, we have something weird happens. The iota is going to subscript. So it's going to be eta with an iota subscript te, because eta can never take an iota next to it. The iota always has to subscript. Second stem, we've got itase, perfectly normal. And third stem, itesa, same thing here. The iota is going to subscript. That should actually be a 10 instead of a 4 right there. All right, akalutheo, nothing unusual. The epsilon is going to lengthen to an eta in these two stems. Ginao, nothing unusual. Alpha lengthens to eta. Zao, alpha lengthens to eta. Now watch that one. It's a very short stem, just 2 letters. So that de might look a little unfamiliar. So you'll have to sort of backtrack in your mind and say, do I know a deo or a zao? Oh, wait, I do know a zao. Zeteo, the epsilon lengthens to an eta. Kaleo, this is the one we talked about before. The epsilon does not lengthen. That is unusual or irregular, so watch out for that. Laleo, the epsilon lengthens to eta. Martireo, the epsilon lengthens to eta. Horao, in the first stem, when you add an augment, the omicron with the augment becomes epsilon omega instead of epsilon omicron. In the second stem, we get the stem of ops and its deponent. So opsami is the future middle indicative first person singular deponent. In the third stem, we get the id root. So this is a couple of different vowels or verbs that have blended together to form their different principal parts. So this is a complete change of stem. It is a second aorist, so it's going to take second aorist endings. And the augment is going to be weird. When we add an epsilon, it's going to become epsilon iota, which isn't too abnormal, but it's not going to be a lengthened iota there. So watch out for that. Parakaleo does the exact same thing that kaleo does with the epsilon not lengthening. Peripateo, the iota does not drop when we add the epsilon for the augment. So periepate, whatever. In the second stem, it's normal. In the third stem, it's normal, except for, again, that iota doesn't drop out. Pleirao, the omicron lengthens to an omega. Poieo, the epsilon lengthens to an eta. And phobelmai does not show up in the second or in the third stems. It is deponent in the first stem, though. You'll need to memorize each of those so that you can produce those stems. Now note, akalutheo, which means I follow, martireo, I bear witness or testify, and poieo, I do or I make, take a direct object in the dative case. We've talked before about that with akuo taking a direct object in the genitive or in the accusative, and then pistuo takes a direct object in the dative. These three take direct objects in the dative as well. So summary, contract verbs contract in the first stem. In the other stems, the vowel in the stem lengthens before the sa or sigma or sa gets added, but no contraction happens in those other stems. Present active infinitive of ao verbs is an. Present active indicative of ao verbs is un. Akalutheo, martireo, and poieo take a direct object in the dative case.